There's been a great deal of controversy over the recent position about abortion put up by President Trump and a few of his surrogates that has caused a lot of people in the pro-life movement on the right side of the political spectrum in America to draw a lot of assumptions and make a lot of claims about the current state of the conservative movement's position on abortion.
My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land, in this case, the law of the state. Many states will be different. Many will have a different number of weeks, or some will have more conservative than others, and that's what they will be. At the end of the day, this is all about the will of the people. You must follow your heart, or in many cases, your religion or your faith. Do what's right for your family and do what's right for yourself.
And there are roughly two perspectives that emerged in the response of President Trump's position statement on abortion. The first perspective says roughly that abortion is a matter of the states, that there should be 3 exceptions: rape, incest, life of the mother, and that this should not be a defining characteristic issue for the GOP and for other Republican candidates going into the 2024 presidential election. Then there's the other position that says that by refusing to embrace a national abortion ban, which is what a lot of people on the pro-life right are calling for, and by refusing to make a decisive commitment to this issue this election season, President Trump is somehow being soft on abortion, his surrogates are being soft on abortion, and the conservative movement has lost touch with its internal values. I think both perspectives have merits that we need to consider, but they also have flaws. And I think that both perspectives don't really think about the issue in the way that we ought to think about it as a movement, as a pro-American movement going into the next election, and really beyond the election, because I don't really care about elections. Elections are simply things that happen every 4 years that are transitory and non-permanent. What is permanent are the values that we embrace and that inform how we interact with the government and system and society in which we live. So I'm not going to give you an electoral analysis, because people that spend all their time crunching numbers, looking at data, obsessing over the minutia of political advancement are actually have lost touch with the real substantive issues that are at play here. This is not to insult any pollster or any person that likes to look at data. I understand that's an entire genre and people like it. I get it. But you're not feeding us with the substance that we need to reconnect with what it actually means to be an American, to gain a better and richer understanding of our country, and to improve our moral thinking so that when these issues arise, we can think about them in a logical and fruitful way. The first issue, I think, with this, there are two perspectives here. I am personally pro-life. So I'm going to begin with the pro-life perspective, because I am 100% pro-life in every case. And so that's a radical position, I understand, but I'm going to begin with that perspective. The pro-life movement is essentially allowing their personal moral sensibilities to taint their understanding of politics and of strategy. Essentially, and I'm speaking broadly here, this is obviously not everybody in the pro-life movement, but there are a lot of people who are very visible in the public conversation who do this. And so what they will do is they'll say, if you don't support a federal abortion ban, you are somehow not giving the due that is needed for the unborn. Well, this is not necessarily true, because a federal abortion ban and creating a culture and ultimately a legal system that opposes abortion, which, by the way, I support, has nothing to do with each other. They're actually incidental to each other, and one of them is actually detrimental to the other. A federal abortion ban is both constitutionally and socially impossible to obtain in America. Let's go with the constitutional. Our laws in this country are governed by norms at every level, whether it's federal laws, local laws, or state laws. They're typically governed by norms, both good norms and bad norms. One of the norms that has been dominant throughout American history, as per the Jeffersonian Principles of '98, which emphasize the sovereignty of states to conduct their own internal affairs. This is a cornerstone principle of our republic that Texas just invoked to secure their border when the federal government tried to force them not to. They invoked the Jeffersonian Principles of '98. If you guys don't know what those are, you should look them up. They're really rich. They're really good. But one of the norms is that states govern the issue of murder. Murder, unless it happens to a federal official like a president or a judge, is not a federal issue. So for the pro-life movement to stake their entire claim over getting a federal abortion ban, when in terms of the legal norms that govern the issue of murder, that's not really an option. If abortion is murder, which I believe it is, then you want the states to address that because the states regulate murder. This is not a moral position. This is a position of sound legal thinking and sound constitutional thinking. If we discard the Constitution to pursue our moral vision of the world, the pro-life movement will be no better than some leftists who seek to manifest their version of paradise, of this egalitarian paradise, upon the rest of the world through force. Let's not do that. Let us argue within the frameworks that our founders gave us so that we can enrich America and not take away from America. The pro-life movement's critique should be focused on the state houses of the various territories around this country. It should be focused on culturally making abortion something that is absolutely not an option and that is discouraged. Look at Kansas. Kansas is a historically conservative state, and yet overwhelmingly it affirmed the false right of abortion. That's a problem. You have to target that domain, because if you just target the legal domain, that'll do absolutely nothing to look at the root cause of why abortions happen in the first place. So their sentiment is misplaced. A national abortion ban is not needed to protect the unborn. Laws that consider abortion to be murder on the state level, where they've always been, that's what's needed. And that's why I support this idea of leaving it to the states. Now, some people say that if you leave it to the states, you're giving the states the ability to select their own morality. No, because again, you're mixing moral categories with legal categories. The reason the constitutional category of states' rights matters is not really a connected to any sort of moral issue, more than it is connected to a structural issue. In a system, in a classically Republican system of governance, the minority is protected. It's protected by dividing power through not just different branches within one institution like the government, but different levels spread across an entire nation, so that the people who are most affected by the issues they talk about have the ability to interact with those issues. So essentially, by allowing people to locally decide this issue, they can better interact with it, understand it, appreciate it, and therefore you get a cultural change of some sort. So I don't want to hear more of this. If you don't support a federal abortion ban, you are immoral. No, if you don't support a federal abortion ban, at least on that merit, you are actually adhering to the Jeffersonian principles of 98. You are actually adhering to what constitutional order in America should mean, but what it hasn't meant for so many years, because the Supreme Court keeps destroying it and giving away the traditional rights of the states to the federal government, and doing so in a very, very terrible way. But then you go over to the Trump position. And you hear Kari Lake, for example. Kari Lake was one who touted the three exceptions. By the way, Kari Lake's a friend of the show. She's been on our show before. I love Kari Lake. But a lot of people were like, well, actually, this isn't good. And people on this side will say, they'll answer with the opposite. They will say, do you want to be morally sound, or do you want to win elections? This is a false dilemma. This is actually one of the greatest examples of a false dilemma I've seen. You know why? Because it presumes that moral thinking and correct positions are separate from winning elections. Now, in reality, they may very well be separate, because people that want to win elections may not necessarily think about morality. But if you want to create a healthy society and a healthy political order, morality must be at the basis of your concern to win elections. Let me explain this to you. In a classically Republican system, the government gets its legitimacy from the consent of the governed. Now, what informs consent? Because we have to ask that question, because if consent is where legitimacy arises, what informs consent? One of the many things that informs consent, beyond personal taste or whatever, or the beliefs we've grown up with, is expectation. Expectation informs consent. Now, if someone expects their government or their representative or whatever to do something, that will inform how they direct their consent in the next election at the ballot box. But if someone has no expectations or has the wrong expectations, that will also inform how they direct their consent at the ballot box. What am I saying? What I'm saying is very simple. If you give people an expectation that you will not be morally convicted in your politics, that you will not fight for the truth and what is correct, that you will not have a rigorous basis upon which you make your political decisions, they will not expect that from you either, and they won't be able to exercise the consent of the governed in the best way possible. It's one thing to consent. It's another thing to have informed consent and moral consent, which leads to a better political order. That's the problem. When you draw this dichotomy between being morally righteous and winning elections, you set a standard in the mind of the voter that primes them not to care about morality at all, which then leads to a political system that is not representative, that is based on special interest, that is corrupt and overrun with blackmail and all kinds of things, and that fundamentally rejects the first principles our nation is founded upon. So please, don't send me any more memes or jokes or arguments stating, oh, Christian, we have to win elections. Because I fundamentally reject that winning elections and being morally righteous are mutually exclusive. They are not. In fact, they are necessary if you want to have a political system that is proper and healthy and not one that has devolved into corruption. There's another issue I think that we have to have in this sort of debate. That we have to have moral clarity when we talk about the issue of abortion. A lot of people, like for example, want the government to be involved in, forget abortion, in an issue that is related to abortion, the sort of management of the family. A lot of people believe that it is the prerogative for the government to be involved in how the family life in America grows, which is why President Trump mentioned in his statement that he wants the government to help make family life better and easier. And there's been other proposals that say we want to provide subsidies to families, we want to provide tax cuts to families, all this kind of stuff. And by the way, while I support tax cuts generally, I don't support subsidies. What this approach underscores is a desire from the government to centrally manage and plan the family. It's an intrusion from the public sphere, which is the sphere of law and politics, where all legitimate things that the government can do and must do are there. In the private sphere, which is the sphere of society and family, where the individual and families are supposed to have the dominion over that particular area, it's an invasion into that area, and it's an attempt to organize the cornerstone institution of society, which is the family. And if you can organize that institution of society, you can change the society, and this is what's been happening. The government has been managing the American family since the early 20th century, revivalists of the thoughts of the maternalist reformers who birthed the Children's Bureau in 1912, which was basically the first plank of the child welfare state. The child welfare state has brought rise to CPS, which routinely confiscates kids from their parents because the parents don't want to trans them, or the parents don't want to buy into their delusions, their childhood delusions. CPS is known for taking your kids away. So the government invaded the family sphere on that level, on the level of so-called protecting children, when in all reality it does the exact opposite. Then the government invaded this family sphere on the level of providing a supplement for the father. The maternalist reformers, they really wanted to have the government be a replacement for the father in the household in the event that the father was not around. Instead of trying to create a societal norm where the father was encouraged to be around, they wanted the government to fulfill the financial role of the father. But the problem with that is you may be able to fill a financial role, but the father also has a spiritual role in the family. The government can't fulfill a spiritual role because the government is an impersonal entity that operates by force, not love. Force is the antithesis to love. So then you go over into the 60s and you get an acceleration of this kind of rhetoric that then leads to the further management of the family by LBJ, who he didn't start it. It started in the early 20th century, but he accelerated it. And then you get a welfare state that has, to date, created a serious pandemic of single motherhood in America, which has created broken people, broken homes, broken families, and has led to societal ills, and is a precursor, in many cases, to women getting abortion. So I don't want the government to manage family. I don't want the government to provide resources for family. I don't want the government to do anything like that. I want the government to stay out of the way and to encourage social relationships within communities by not being involved. And that helps families. That strengthens families. No conservative vision for a pro-life future should involve the government giving subsidies or other kinds of things to encourage familial growth. No. Encourage it on a cultural level. Now, another thing I think we should also probably realize is that if you want to beat back the sort of bureaucracy we've seen sort of technocratic, expert-based bureaucracy we've seen governing medical issues, you should probably also endorse a position of the government not being involved in that particular issue. Another problem I think that we need to have clarity on is the issue of exceptions. As I mentioned, I don't believe there are any exceptions for abortion, personally. People say that rape, incest, and life of the mother are the exceptions. I disagree. Because the question at hand is not about the horrific nature of some of these incidences, because most certainly forcible sex is absolutely reprehensible. Incest is reprehensible. Things of that sort. It's about the universal value of human life. And the universal value of human life is not conditional insofar as someone can have done nothing at all that is wrong, and they can still be punished for it. In this case, the baby. The universal nature of human life is strong and is concrete. And we have, in any ethic in society that recognizes that, must be stalwart on this issue. I think that when people group, there's also like a categorical error. When people group rape, incest, and life of the mother together, they're doing what I call proximity ethics. Because all of those things I just mentioned are fundamentally distinct from each other. They have their own moral implications, and they should be treated by sober minds in a manner that is distinct to their own merits. But instead, the pro-choice crowd, or the pro-life but not all the way crowd, likes to group them together as if they're all one thing. That's not the case. Proximity ethics, my friends, define it for you, is a moral error that occurs when certain concepts are assessed on the basis of their closeness to something rather than on their own distinct merits. The overarching moral principle that advises against abortion is, as I mentioned, the universal value of human life and the demands that it places on all of us in society who engage in universal behavior. The unborn child is living and is therefore endowed with the privileges of living, the most fundamental of them all being the inalienability of life. If your life is inalienable, not even you have the right to violate what that means. This universal quality then remains consistent in the cases of both rape and incest, and therefore excludes the allowance of abortion in either case, no matter how horrific. Now, the third category, which is the life of the mother, is called ectopic pregnancy. Now, ectopic pregnancies are not even the same thing as abortion. They're actually categorically distinct. An ectopic pregnancy is only considered the same thing as rape or incest by proximity. By no other principle would it actually be considered that way. An ectopic pregnancy, which is the technical term for the mother will die because the baby inside of her is not going to survive until they both could die, therefore we got to get rid of the baby. Well, it's not an abortion. It's a life-saving procedure at that point, which, by the way, is exceptionally rare. I think it's even rarer than abortion, which is like less than 1% of all abortion cases. It's a life-saving procedure that saves one life, whereas a life in the womb is absolutely bound to perish without any involvement from the abortionist. There should be philosophical and moral clarity on these issues if the pro-America vanguard is going to survive the postmodern hell we currently exist in this country. And if we're going to have an enduring success on the messaging of the pro-life movement, we must also have moral clarity on these issues, my friends. We must also have a philosophical grounding for these issues as well. That's why, my friends, Trump's announcement should not be looked at with disdain or anger. It should be seen as a launching pad for a broader cultural and social project that people who support the pro-life position righteously can use to continue to evangelize our message to those who need them the most, those in low-income communities, those in minority communities, those who may be in suburban communities, but they simply were acted by guilt or whatever. That's what a lot of abortions is happening. That is how we can move forward on this issue. All in all, Trump's approach is actually quite righteous, considering this age of constitutional illiteracy that we see that has been happening for a very, very long time and has gotten worse and worse as time goes on. An approach that actually used Jeffersonian principles of 98 and the principles of states' rights and federalism to delegate what is delegated by virtue of it not being expressly mentioned in the Constitution is righteous, it is good, and it is a sound legal approach. On the moral front, the pro-life movement should continue to advance and keep on keeping on, because I believe that the message is in our favor. I think that the culture is become in our favor. I think that our cause is truthful, which matters the most. It doesn't matter how many people agree with you or not. If your cause is truthful and righteous, you will eventually get the assent of men. even if it takes them a long time to reach the same conclusion, even if it takes them years or decades. We have to keep evangelizing the value of every life, including life in the womb. And I believe that that is going to be the best pathway forward for the conservative movement on abortion as we approach this election. Stop the infighting, stop the over-moralizing, stop the mixing moral and legal categories, and simply fight where you can in a best way and in an ecumenical way and in a way that can deliver results. My friends, like this video, comment on this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel if you want to support my message, my mission and my message rather. You can donate to me as well, which is in the comment section down below. If you also want to help me get out there, you can also subscribe to me as well if you would like. If you have not subscribed, I would really appreciate it. I would like to have you here. If you enjoy philosophical and social commentary with a philosophical bent, a political and social commentary with a philosophical bent, then this is the channel for you to be at. My friends, study history, study philosophy, remain morally convicted, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.